This is Joe Wong. Welcome to the Trap Set. During the age of social distancing, we're recording remotely and releasing episodes every day. Today's guest is Brian Chippendale, who is perhaps best known as the drummer and vocalist for Lightning Bolt, a Providence-based duo he co-founded in 1994. Aside from his work in Lightning Bolt, Chippendale also releases solo music under the name Black Pus. An alumnus of Rhode Island School of Design, he's also a prolific visual artist and graphic novelist. He spoke to me from his studio in Providence.
Hello.
Brian.
Hey.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Tell me what you've been up to today.
Today, oh my God. It's we're like living in the crazy moment. I'm like, basically my days, and today was no different. I have a 3-year-old son, and I just like, at this point, I'm kind of doing 3-year-old son stuff from 7 a.m. till, if I'm lucky, I can get to the studio by 4 or 5. And then sometimes it's like 5 or 6 or 7. And then I'm there for 3 hours or something, or 4 hours, and I do some work. And then I kind of like sleep, drive home, and then start it all over again.
When you say studio, do you mean a visual art studio or a recording studio or both?
It is both. It's not a recording studio. So yeah, it's a visual art studio. And it's funny, I'm so used to this, you'll probably have to edit this out or not, but I'm so used to talking in the phone and not using earbuds that I have like the earbuds and I'm holding the phone to my face, which is ridiculous, but old-fashioned. So it's like it's a studio for visual art, and then we also practice in here. So it's I love it. It's a great space. Like I moved in here about 2 years ago after the place I'd been in for 15 years, kind of the building was almost coming apart at the seams, and so it got emptied out, and now I think it's just completely abandoned. Now I'm in a mill complex, of which these sort of old mills we have in the east, and I have my own building within that mill complex. So it's like a 2,000 square foot building, then it has a basement, and I can play drums 24 hours a day in here.
How often do you play drums in practice?
I mean, generally, it's just such a weird time because we've lost all daycare, and my wife has suddenly gotten involved in this project, which has her just like insanely busy all day. But prior to that, I try to play every day. I mean, I'm definitely playing 5 days a week, but it's just for like an hour. And then for and it's not always Lightning Bolt. Like Lightning Bolt hasn't played in a few months. Do
you generally sit down with an agenda when you're playing?
I have absolutely no agenda. I sit down with zero agenda. Every once in a while, every once in a while, maybe I'll have I'll have an idea in my head or something but it's all improvisation. I just like sit down, and when I play by myself here, generally it means I'm playing with this sort of like, it's my solo performance system, which is like these dual oscillators on my kick, and then I do vocals, and I do like loops and stuff. So when I sit down to play by myself, I don't just like play the drums. I'm like kind of doing this whole, like this kind of minimal music making thing that I have going on.
You mentioned you have a 3-year-old. Do you have any memories of being 3 yourself, or like really early memories?
I have a couple. I have a couple memories from probably around that time period, because I spent the first 2 years of my life in this town, Newburgh, New York, like just north of the city, and we were only there for 2 years, and I have like a memory from there. So it must have been age 2 or something. But it's kind of become like a cartoon, and it's like a memory of me, like my sister running down the street and like holding my hand, and I'm like flying through the air. Like she's pulling me so fast and hard that I'm like airborne in my memory. And this gang of boys, there was like it's like a story more than a memory, but there was this like gang of boys, and they were brothers, and I think they were called the Gad Boys. And their last name must have been Gad. And so the Gad Boys were chasing us. That's like my earliest memory. But I kind of feel like old memories they're probably more stories that have been reinforced over time than they are memories. I don't know where
and to a certain extent, all memories are, right? Because it's filtered through our own biases and the way our brain works.
Yeah, totally. Just telling the tale or thinking the tale, or
we're always framing it.
Always. So I don't have a whole lot, and it's funny because now that I have a 3-year-old, there's like some discussion around the way memory works, and that as a child learns language, they forget their pre-language memories, because it's almost as if
we were saying, like framing language is the ultimate framing device,
right? So if you have a whole set of memories that don't fit into that framing device, they just fade away because there's no sort of network to hold it together.
It's really interesting.
Do you have any kids?
No, I don't.
Yeah,
I think about it. It's under consideration.
Yeah, I mean, we pushed it till the bitter end. I mean, when he was born, I was 44. So, and my wife turned 40 like a week after he was born. So you can keep pushing it, but we tried to stay kids as long as we could.
So do you think that it's true that once you become responsible for another person, that's the delineation of when you can't be a child anymore? Yourself?
I mean, it's some sort of delineation. I don't know. I don't think it's actually that. I think, some people are like, it's like, it brings you back to being a child and all this stuff. But I think I've led a pretty childlike life in a way. So I'm not having the same experience that maybe some people are about rediscovering their youth. I've kind of kept, I think as a musician and an artist, some of them, perhaps, like you can kind of keep that going the whole time. That's in a way, because like being a kid is in some way, it's sort of like you're just playing. It's like you're like playing, and you're sort of discovering the world through play. And then I think as an artist and musician, that's the central theme to some extent. Right. I mean, you can kind of add in sort of science to that in a way, but in a way, science is sort of play as well. So I don't know if it delineates. I mean, it just fucking delineates like you're tired. Like my son. It's just this karmic payback. He is just like the Energizer Bunny. Like I've always been pretty high energy. And this kid is he's just so, he can't focus on anything for like more than 2 minutes. He loves climbing on me, and he's just like in a ball of, fury and wildness, and it's just so tiring. So it delineates for me. I was just like a young man, and then I had a kid, and now I just feel like so beat up.
Oh man!
So I don't know if that's adulthood or what, but it's just fucking beat up.
Resignation, that feeling of resignation, that's adulthood.
Yeah, and now we're fucking isolated with a little crazy gremlin. We're like we can't go to the playground, can't play with his friends. It's actually really difficult.
Yeah, that must be so hard not to see your friends when you're that age and you don't understand why you can't see your friends.
Yeah. It's hard. And even he has some friends, there's like kind of a crew on his street. There's he's 3, there's a 4-year-old, and there's a 5-year-old.
The Gad friends, or the Gad
Boys? The Gad Boys, yeah, the recreation of the Gad Boys. And the 4-year-old and the 5-year-old will kind of like check each other out on the like FaceTime or Zoom or whatever. Like they have like an intellectual friendship to some extent. Like they can like talk, and like hang out, but for him, it's just, it hasn't arrived. So he has like a physical friend. His friendships are physical friendships, really. I mean, they all laugh and they make poop jokes and it's funny and stuff, but a lot of it's just like chasing and playing. And so the digital stuff is just, he just hates it. He doesn't even, he try to like Zoom with people or whatever, and he just freaks out. He does not like it. And, you know, we have to explain, it's like every playground we have to be like, yeah, we can't go to that one either. Like we just can't go to the, you know, so it's been challenging. But luckily in Rhode Island where I am, there's a lot of nature and there's not like a ton of people. So we've been actually able to kind of escape out in the nature, and that's been the good part of it, is we've like the family, the three of us have spent a lot of time just like wandering around kind of in the backwoods of Rhode Island and the beaches and stuff.
So you mentioned that you spent the first few years of your life in this town in New York. Where did you spend most of your childhood?
Most of my childhood was in the suburbs of Philadelphia. So I was like born in Newburgh, New York, which is like a pretty raw little zone in New York. And then my dad, like, his job got transferred to St. Louis, and I was in St. Louis for a couple years. And then we moved outside of Philadelphia into the suburbs, and then that's where I was up until college when I came to Rhode Island.
What kind of music was on in your house when you were growing up?
John Denver.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think about that, because like at some point I kind of ran off with all my parents' records, and like my kid loves, at least Leaving on a Jet Plane, it's like one of his favorite songs. So we play, you know, we'll put like John Denver on, and it's just like this weird cycle of like, oh my God, I'm like, I remember this, you know, being a kid in the house listening to John Denver, and my parent, you know, and now I'm playing John Denver, and it's literally the same vinyl record, and this crazy continuum of something. But my parents were, I mean,
were they John Denver type people?
They're John Denver type people. My first concert was John Denver, but they're not. They're pretty straight laced. They're like liberal. I wouldn't call them progressive, but they're like, you know, they're pretty smart about stuff. They were like they're not psyched about Biden, but they're not into Bernie. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of stuck with Biden. So they're like in that camp. I guess that's a big camp. But they're just, I don't know. They're like, you know, they're moderate, sort of moderately liberal people, but they like snuck into Woodstock as kids. So they had like a hippie vein a little bit, but they're not hippies. I mean, they're like, you know, they're pretty straight laced. They're cool though. They're nice.
And was your sister into music?
My sister is a musician, but she is a classically trained violinist. So, I mean, my memory of her, you know, the music she got into like a goth phase for a while. So like, you know, like Depeche Mode and that stuff this is the 80s. And so she would go out like kind of to dance clubs or something in high school. I vaguely remember. But she's a classical violinist. So, and she's now teaches, in Philadelphia in schools as the music teacher. So she's gone. I mean, I kind of feel terrible about it sometimes because, you know, she went to Boston University and, mm-hmm. you know, did really well and got a double degree of music and then writing. She's also was it writing or something? I don't know, something having to do with words. She's just like always been a great student. She has a music degree and all this stuff, and it's just really hard to be a classical musician. So it's not like, and then I kind of roll in just like playing the drums like an idiot, and I feel like it's just easier to
what
kind
do you
of
mean
make
by like an idiot?
I don't know, like an idiot, or maybe not like an idiot, maybe just as an idiot. Is that what you mean?
No, I'm trying to understand. You know, lots of people appreciate your drumming, so I'm wondering what that means to you.
Right. I feel like I'm kind of like I'm not a trained musician, and I kind of think at some points, like the way, like for me, if I'm practicing, it's almost at times my attempt is to like untrain myself even more. So like to just try to do stupid stuff or something. I don't. I'm not that interested in. And I say this with a grain of salt because I've had sort of critiques of my drumming as like he's not technical, blah 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 blah, and then I'm like, I'm not going to give people that much or something, or I'm not. I've learned a lot of techniques over the years, but it's just not my priority. So my priority is just sort of to play like a 3-year-old, like to exert myself and to like try to entertain myself and just wear myself out.
But do you really think that makes you an idiot?
I mean, a little bit. I mean, an idiot as in like, I mean, a lot, one of the main goals when I'm playing is to like shut the brain down in a way. Or,
I think I think that's the goal no matter what your level of training, ultimately.
Well, it might be the goal, but a lot of people don't. I don't think a lot of people actually arrive at the place where they feel like they can shut the brain down.
Right. I think that if you pursue formalized training, then lots of that training revolves around, intellectual theory. So it engages your mind. But then the ultimate goal is to arm yourself with that arsenal of knowledge and then, to the point where it becomes reflexive and you're not thinking anymore, except,
right. It's just all muscle memory. You're like Super Ninja.
Right. But you're kind of bypassing that and you're engaging it. I mean, there's clearly thought that goes into what you're doing to a certain extent, but
yeah, for sure.
I kind of feel like your art background, probably your visual arts background, probably informs what you're doing musically more than like, musical studies.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. I mean, like in art, I remember some of the biggest. I remember being in like a painting class, and there's this, I forget who the teacher was, but this one sort of legendary painting teacher at the school, Rhode Island School of Design is the school I went to. And every once in a while, some weird little sentence or phrase hits you in the head. And so I'd be like drawing we'd be doing, I think there was a figure in the class or something, or like a model, and I was drawing. And it was kind of it was like a class where he pushed you to just do whatever. But at the time, I didn't even understand what that meant. Like, but I remember drawing the figure and then coloring in some section of the drawing that was like, it wasn't the figure, it was just sort of like this shape that was created, like the way the figure interacted with the wall. And he came over and he came by and he was just really psyched because I'd been drawing the figure, but I'd found a shape that I'd found more interesting in the drawing than the figure, and I'd focused in on it. And I remember sort of being hit by this thing like, just, you have to pursue what's interesting, and you have to, you can't be attached to maybe the initial goal. You just have to pursue what's interesting. And then when you get there, you kind of have to really go for it. Like you can't just like touch it and then bounce back to the sort of main goal. It's just like, if you find a tangent, like dive through it like it's an escape hatch and just go for it. And I do think that in music that has become, it's definitely something I'm interested in. Like and I think luckily in Lightning Bolt, the other Brian is somewhat interested in that, but also we've been able to kind of choreograph, like do some writing around that idea and have it work pretty well because of like the sort of the simplicity of our setup and our relationship. And I don't know. So yeah, tangents, which I don't necessarily think is, I don't remember what I was. I'm going down my own tangent now, and I don't remember where it started.
Well, we were talking about how your training in visual arts may have informed the way that you play music.
Yeah.
And so that's a really good example. But when you were a kid growing up and your sister was listening to goth music, did you start developing kind of a taste of your own distinct from that of the rest of your family?
For sure. I mean, like any kid, I got into like, not like any kid gets into metal, but yeah, I got into my own thing. And my thing was kind of metal. But, originally it was radio rock. Like I just listened to what was on the radio because what were you going to do back in that day? That was your choice, really. Like you had your parents' record collection and then you had the radio at first. And then, maybe at some point you discovered, I don't remember when I started buying like tapes and stuff and LPs, but, sometime, I don't know, maybe high school, but, originally it was the radio. And then I think it was maybe sixth grade. I think 1984 by Van Halen came out and it hit me really hard. Mm-hmm. And like, that's one of the earliest albums I remember listening to.
I'm speaking to you from a place that's about a mile away from the Van Halen family home.
Oh, really?
Pasadena, California.
Oh, shit.
And
Let's
David
go.
Lee Roth actually has a house within, walking distance from me.
That's amazing. I've heard. I was
strong.
Yeah, you're right. You're in Van Halen land over there. Yeah, I heard. I mean, it's interesting. David Lee Roth sounds like an interesting character. I was listening to a weirdest possible combination, but it was like Joe Rogan interviewing Henry Rollins, and Henry Rollins was talking about his friendship with David Lee Roth.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, it didn't make sense to me, but I guess it makes sense. I don't really know. I don't know much about really Henry Rollins. I do. I mean, that podcast was really interesting. I mean, he did most of the talking, so it was interesting. And I know more about him now. I really haven't been up on, other than the fact that I know that Henry Rollins is like a devoted record collector or music collector. That's like what I knew, and now I know a little more. And yeah, one of those things is that he thinks David Lee Roth is like a real cool dude, and I do too. But I just think of it because of old Van Halen stuff. But he's sort of saying that David Lee Roth has had a pretty interesting life and is like a pretty interesting guy in general going forward, from his early days.
Right. I mean, his uncle ran Cafe Wha in New York City in the Village, which is where lots of folks kind of got their start in the 60s, musically and comedy-wise. And
wow.
David Lee Roth was around for some of those summers. Yeah, he's fascinating. And then he became an EMT at one point, like in the last decade.
Wow. Yeah, he's also like he has like some martial arts, a bunch of martial arts backgrounds and...
Shit, maybe I got to get David Lee Roth on this show and Rollins.
Dude, you have to. I mean, and then Rollins has this crazy... I've been listening to some Joe Rogan podcasts lately, just because, I mean, prior to... Now I'm in this... If I'm lucky, I get 3 hours in here, but generally I'm in here, it's like 6 to 8 hours. That's my kid. That's like my allowed time with having a kid. And then maybe once or twice a month I'm in here for like a really long period, which is great. Like a 20-hour day or something. I get little breaks every once in a while. But now I don't listen to any podcasts because I just have zero time. I like come in here but anyway, Joe Rogan's a weirdo. I don't subscribe. I don't want to push him as like a great person to listen to, but he brings on some interesting guests, which is cool.
To be honest, I haven't really listened to his show, but it's consistently the most popular or second most popular podcast out there. And so he must be doing something that's compelling to people.
He is, yeah. Well, I think it's just, he also has managed to tap into some like huge people, like, he had Edward Snowden on there, which is amazing. But I mean, which was just Edward Snowden talking for 3 hours. And Joe Rogan, I think, said like 5 words. So he's done some interesting. He's interested in stuff. That's what I think the strong thing about Joe Rogan. I mean, or he's interested in a set of things, and they don't necessarily fall in line with a certain political slant. And they sort of define some aspect of like this sort of manliness thing. He's a weirdo, but he's literally like right before talking to you, I glanced at Twitter, as I do way too often. And he's in the news for saying that like he would vote for Trump over Biden. So, Joe Rogan always on the cutting edge. Although I think his main person was Tulsi like a month ago, so I wouldn't necessarily turn to him for my politics.
When did you start playing drums?
When did I start playing drums? I started as a little kid, when I'm a little kid or medium little kid, I remember playing like I would always make the like pots and pans drum sets, which a lot of kids do. But I think I like kept doing it. I like really kept doing it for a while, but I didn't ever have a drum set until I didn't play the drums until 1988, which I would have been. I was born in '73, so I would have been what, like 15. So I started later than some people, but in 1988, me and three friends like decided we wanted to start a band, and one guy played guitar, one guy played bass, and my best friend and me both wanted to sing, and so we drew straws, and then I lost. And this, I mean, I've told this story before, but I lost, and then I was sort of like stuck with the drums, and it was kind of like one of the greatest losses of my life, you know. So, and
What
then
was that band
originally
called?
we were called the Pissants, and we were pretty. I mean, we got pretty good. We basically the guitarist knew every Husker Du song, and then like some, you know, pretty like the Damned and the, I don't know what else was he into, like the Misfits, and so, you know, pretty stripped down stuff. But I didn't really know much about Husker Du at the time. But then I became a huge fan, kind of through a relationship with him. And then the bass player knew every Metallica song. And then me and my best friend David Wilson, who ended up singing, we didn't know anything. So whatever that, you know, so we were like it was like Husker Du with Cliff Burton on bass, which is kind of a horrible idea.
You mean, oh yeah, just that was like the sound of the band. It was Husker Du
Yeah,
with Cliff Burton on bass.
kind of played by people that didn't know how to play. A little bit like that. And then originally I played, we didn't have any drums. We had drumsticks and we had like a boot. I had a leather boot, and we had like a couple tapes. I remember and they were just labeled like the boot days, and I would play like a beat on a rhythm on a boot, and then they would play like really quiet guitar and bass, but like distorted but quiet. And then we like pulled some like weird scam in our town where we like, you know, it's just high school weird relationships. There was like this kid that we used to be friends with, but we weren't friends with anymore. And then this other kid that we used to be friends with, we weren't friends with anymore. And one of them had loaned his electronic drum set to another one, and they weren't talking to each other either, or something. So we went over to the one guy and said we were picking up the drum set for the other guy, and then we just kept it for ourselves. And no one ever said anything. It just sort of, because no one was talking to anybody, like it was just funny, weird high school stuff. And so I had this electronic drum set for maybe a year, which I didn't know how to program, so it was just laser sounds. And then I think I gave that to somebody and bought like a $200 real drum set, like in 1990 or something. So it was a wobbly start.
Did you experience a deep sense of joy from playing drums at that point, or even playing the boot?
I don't know if it was joy, but I was good at it. I just sat down and was like pretty good at it. I mean, back then I think I just had a lot of energy, so it's like I'll play drums, or I'll just like go outside and just run around in a circle, or, you know, ride my bike way too far, or like walk around. I just had a lot of energy, so I just remember kind of being. I think people in the band there were some kind of dramatic. Some of my friends were pretty dramatic and had a lot of like emotional complexity, and I just kind of didn't. I was like, I mean, I was pretty like I was so drummery, like just like everyone's having a hard time and their life's really difficult, and I'm just like sitting in the corner kind of smiling. I mean, I remember having, you know, I had my own emotional complexities, and it was like difficult, and I wrote, you know, dark poetry, and but in general, in the context, I was just like this psych guy that liked playing the drums, but also would just do anything else. It didn't really hit me as like
It
a
wasn't like
life.
it wasn't like central to your identity that you were a drummer. It was kind of an
No,
offshoot of this frenetic energy.
yeah, it was just an offshoot. It didn't become part of my identity till I think a few years later when I was in college, and I don't know, something. I just sort of, I think because I had so much energy in it, and when I went to school, I don't know, maybe I found a place where I could play really loud. Like, because prior, when I was at home, I could never really, and maybe I started playing by myself. Like, I'd never ever played by myself. Like, I would go to, like, the drums were at my friend's house, and we would practice on the weekends over there, and we would just like mess around. But my parents wouldn't let me play drums in the house because it was like too loud. And so when I went to school, I set up drums. Like, they had this kind of student center, and I still wouldn't play all the time, but like when I went, I could really wail on it. And I just remember there was something that switched. Like, when I went to college, suddenly I was just like, like a drummer. Like, this is, when people would be like, whoa, like, who's playing in the student center? I just remember people kind of remarking about things. And yeah, something kind of clicked.
What factored into your decision to attend RISD?
I attended RISD. I applied to 3 schools, all for art, all art schools. And at that time, I like drew all the time, but I was also really into ceramics. And so I applied to a ceramics school in upstate New York called Alfred. And then I applied to a school in Maryland. And I applied to RISD in here in Rhode Island. And I went and visited RISD once, or I went there. Oh, I visited twice. The first time I went there, I was kind of unimpressed, and I was like, I don't want to really go there. And then it's like a good friend of mine at my high school was just like, let's go to RISD. It's going to be so fun. Like, we should both go. And so he had applied, and I forget if we, at that point, if we'd already gotten in or if we were, whatever. But so I was just like, oh, maybe I should reconsider. So I went back up there and visited it again, and I had like a really good experience. Like, I sat in on a crit, I remember, like a freshman crit, and I felt like I just felt like
it's just
art
something
criticism?
Yeah,
art
for
criticism.
Us civilians.
Yeah, for the civilians, that's where you sit around and talk about the work and kind of peel it apart or trash it or praise it or whatever. You just try to like just talk about it. But yeah, it's a critique. And I sat in on this critique, and I just remember I was just so excited about, I think I just got lucky. I sat in on like a good teacher's and with a good class, having a good conversation. I just got to witness this thing, which is not, Rhode Island School Design, or RISD as we call it, has some of that, but then there's some bad stuff too. I mean, like any school. And so I was like, I really want to go here. Like, and it was my friend Vaughn, and I was like, let's do it, Vaughn. And then he was just like, nah, I decided not to go. So he had convinced me to go, and then he ditched and went to a school. He went to like Temple or I don't know, Tyler in Philadelphia, and then I went up there. So it's just like, I feel like it's I don't know. I sort of stumbled through it all. I stumbled through life.
Did you have any ambitions at the time? Like professional ambitions or life ambitions?
No. I think Vaughn Johnson was his name. Vaughn's major selling point to me at RISD is that we would sit on the wall at the top of the hill and we could throw rocks at the Brown students. Like, and Brown is the big Ivy League college on top of the hill, and Rhode Island School of Design is kind of the art school that like clings to the side of the hill, and because there's a big hill in Providence, and so that's that's my ambition that I remember. We're going to throw rocks at the Ivy League kids, and then and then I was a big comic book fan, and so I think probably on some level there was like I could draw comics or something, but no, I had no ambition.
When did you meet Brian Gibson?
Brian Gibson came to Rhode Island School of Design 2 or 3 years after me. And I think I was like a junior or something, maybe. Or I was taking a year off. I kind of went to school, and then I left school, and I went back to school. So I was kind of kicking around for a little extra time. So it's all a little blurry. But he showed up, and I remember people talking about this like crazy awesome bassist just arrived into town or whatever. And then he was kind of into like, he was like big into Primus and maybe Rush.
Uh-huh.
But he was good, but he kind of like had this like slappy style. And we played together. I was playing with this guitarist, and we played together with Brian a couple times. And then Brian said something just like, "You guys are too old and tired. I need to find some other people to play." we had some weird falling out immediately. And so that's maybe a bunch of months later, I stopped playing with that guitarist. And then me and Brian gave it another shot somehow. He'd come around to me, I guess.
When do you feel like it became apparent that you had a special connection with one another?
Oh, special connection. I don't know. I mean, we kind of connected pretty quickly just in terms of like, we were on the same page pretty quickly just musically. I don't know about anything, if you're on the same page with anything else, but like, we had fun. It was fun to play. And we played our first show in this cafe on the school's premises called the Car House, and it was in December of 1994. We played as a two-piece, and then a little while later, we got this guy named Hisham Barucha, and also called Hisham Barucha, who then went on to do who was in Black Dice, and now does Soft Circle, and plays what's his other band? I can't remember suddenly. My mind is blank, but he became our singer. It was sort of the same way with Brian. It was like this hot new bassist in town or whatever, Brian Gibson. It was like this crazy new singer's in town, Hisham Barucha. So we got him for just for like I guess it was like a year and a half. And then me and Brian decided to go it alone after that. But me and Brian aside from our initial weird little stall out, right off the bat, we synced up in some kind of weird way. Like, I was a real physical player, and he was kind of a real physical player in the beginning. And I feel like he's become more of a cerebral player over the years. But I don't know. It's amazing. Brian's like my kind of one of my longest. I mean, kind of is like my longest running relationship, and we're still friends, and we still really enjoy playing, and time has changed. The amount of time has changed since having a kid on my side, and then it's a little harder to play as much as we used to, but it's weird. It's funny, and we've both kind of evolved in some ways, and we've evolved in this way where it's allowed us to kind of continue to do this thing.
Yeah, how would you describe that evolution on your end?
Well, we've both, what is the evolution? I mean, we used to have a much more sort of like, I was way more aggressive towards everything. Like, I would just like play the drums, get super wound up, and then, do sort of like live critiques during the practices about like how shitty his bass line was, or like, but then also, how amazing the bass, like I was just just kind of like a river ran through me. Like I was kind of laid out on my sleeve at all times, I think, for a lot of years in our playing. And that works sometimes with him, and then other times does not work. And we would get in a big, I don't know, we were just very different. He's like kind of introverted about stuff, and I'm very extroverted about that, like about when I'm playing, for sure. And so over the years, I think I have mellowed, and he's opened up a little bit maybe. So our communication has gotten better and kind of more generous. I've become maybe more generous. But I can't say that that's like made the band better. I think it's good to be able to be like, that riff fucking sucks. Like, I don't know. It's not the worst thing in a band. Our songwriting technique is to just play, record, and then listen back. And so we try to, for the most part, try when playing to just be absolutely free about what we're doing. And then you go back and you pick and choose. I don't know if that, I mean, that sort of sounds like a
Right.
similar idea towards your way of doing stuff.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So when you're actually in motion, you're not thinking, but then you're engaging your mind afterwards to edit.
Yeah, exactly. But that doesn't always, there's always the mood of the day. And sometimes it's like when you're having a rough practice, it can seem like it's the other person's fault. When in fact it might be your own fault.
Or no one's fault.
Or no one's fault.
Sometimes it just doesn't happen, right?
Yeah, sometimes it just doesn't happen.
And I think if you can manage to keep a creative relationship together for long enough to figure out those kind of things, then maybe it makes it easier as you go along.
Yeah, I think so. I think it does. But a song, but it's interesting because back when we had a more ferocious relationship, we wrote more. We had like things happened kind of faster. I think, at times when if you start being really generous with each other, it can lead to like a certain paralysis sometimes.
Yeah, or it could have just been concurrent. You could have.
Yeah, I
the
think
ferocity could have torn apart the band, and then you wouldn't be making any work too.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the ferocity meant that we were practicing every day. I mean, for years we practiced every day, and it was like, and we were, maybe not both always into it, but we kind of just like decided to do this thing, and every once in a while someone would call or whatever and be like, I think I need to take the night off. Like, I'm really sorry. And that's when we became telepathic. I mean, that was early on, and then we've way mellowed since then. Now it's just like, I'm thinking about taking the night off. I'm like, that sounds great. That sounds great. Let's take tonight and tomorrow and like the next week off. But we put in this certain amount of time for the first, I don't know, decade of our existence where we just like constantly played.
Do you ever hang out?
Well, now, I mean, I feel like that's what's happened over the years is like now we get into the room, we just talk for an hour and then we're like, oh shit, we should play. And then you like bust through some weird shit for half an hour and then get out of there.
Well, I wonder if the talking is just as productive creatively as playing would have been 20 years ago.
I don't know. It might be productive just for our general well-being, which is important. But we don't hang out outside of that very much. Like, we don't hang out. I mean, we hang out when we, at practice, and I hang out with him in like a closer way than I hang out with a lot of people I know. But we don't like schedule like, hey, let's go get lunch or something. Like even on tour, like we don't even like eat dinner together. Like we go our separate ways and stuff. Like we give each other a lot of space.
Yeah, I think that's important when you're spending that kind of time together.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think the first time that I remember the first time I heard about Lightning Bolt was at a punk house in Milwaukee where I grew up. And I didn't live at the house yet. I would eventually live there for about a year after I turned 18. But there were shows there. And one of the bands that played in 1996 was Airborne Radar.
Whoa, yes.
And I was blown away. I'd never experienced anything like the energy that they were putting out in that basement. And, after the show, I was talking to them about where they came from and what the scene was like. And they were raving about Lightning Bolt.
Whoa.
And
was that really? That was 96?
It might have been 96 or 97. I was 16, I know.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. I mean, yeah. Sometime around then, things started to kind of... I remember them sort of from that era.
I remember they had screen-printed records. I think the label was called Heparin, like the blood thinner.
Yep.
And they had... I don't think it was on this run, but on a subsequent run, within the next year, they had T-shirts with Venus de Milo with a bleeding crotch.
Which was my design.
Right. So then they were telling us about your band, and you never played in that basement, but other bands from Providence around the same time came through. Like you mentioned Black Dice, and then Landed, and there was some band called Boss Man that played there a couple times.
Yeah, Boss Man. There's some band called Boss Man that played there 40 times.
They played there a couple times.
Yeah,
but then I started to notice that there were some commonalities between bands and the aesthetic coming out of Providence. I mean, it was almost like a regional scene that you hear people talking about, like the Philly soul scene of the 60s or something. There was a aesthetic through line that I was feeling. And then a couple years later, I believe you set this show up, but I was in a band and we played at the Living Room in Providence, and the show had my band, the All Scars, Cromtech, which was Mick Barr's band, with my friend Malcolm. It was a duo.
Yeah, I remember Cromtech for sure.
And then we all stayed at a place where you were living called Fort Thunder.
Yeah, what band were you? Which was your band then?
It was called Acarso.
Cool, I don't remember that. Because I think that poster, I made this weird poster. It was like a box with with Cromtech and All Scars on it.
I think we might have jumped on the show later.
Okay,
which
yeah.
would explain why we might not have been on the poster.
Yeah, I don't think you were on the poster. And then there was like an orange man that was a separate print that stood on the box. It was actually just like a huge production for that print. But yeah, that's funny. That's probably why, because I don't think you were on the poster. That's why I don't remember. I only remember things by posters.
Well, I remember, my memory of Fort Thunder is pretty vivid, but could you kind of describe what it was and what it represented at that stage in your life?
Yeah, God, it was everything for us at that stage in life. Not everything, but it was huge. It was a warehouse, another old mill.
How many square feet was it?
I think it was about 7,000 square feet.
Yeah, it was huge.
It was huge. It was, it was like a city block almost. And there was anywhere from, maybe the average amount of roommates was around 10 or something, 11. Do
you remember what your rent was?
Oh God, it was so cheap. It was, at its cheapest, at its lowest, I think we each paid like $140 a month. And like $140 a month each roommate, and that was like there'd be like it was like 1,000 for a while, and then it went up to 1,500. It was 1,500 for a long time for 7,000 square feet, and like tall ceiling, and just like giant, big windows, just like this like amazing place. And it was kind of cut into, so it was like a long rectangle, and there was kind of like the 2/3 side and the 1/3 side, and so the bigger side where we had shows and stuff, originally 4 of us moved in and we just had that much of the space. We probably had like 5,000 square feet, and we paid, it was $1,000. And then at some point we kind of got this backside. And so there were 4 bedrooms, 4 or 5 bedrooms kind of in this main space. And then in the backside, like everybody else was kind of crammed in back there. But everybody made their own rooms out of just whatever. I mean, it was, it's this kind of thing that now, in the sort of shadow of the ghost ship fire and all this stuff, there's a whole new context for it all. Like, we made our rooms out of, gasoline cans and, whatever, like old lighters or whatever. Like everything's, what seemed interesting back then it's just different now somehow.
Well, what I remember is it felt like basically a giant art project.
Yes.
Some people had rooms that could only be accessed by climbing up a step ladder about 10, 12 feet and jumping through a hole in the wall to a loft space. There was a refrigerator door used as a regular door. So you open up this refrigerator and then it leads to a corridor. And then
that took you to the kind of the 2/3 or the 1/3, like the kind of back to half. That took you, the refrigerator door in the kitchen took you back there.
Yeah, I remember that. And then to the left, when you went down that corridor, there was a collection of arcade video games. And I remember staying up all night with the drummer from the All Scars, a guy named Jerry Busher, who later went on to be the second drummer in Fugazi. And
No, what? Wait, second drummer in Fugazi? I didn't even know there was.
Yeah, he was like the auxiliary drummer along with Brendan for the
Okay,
later
along
tours.
with Brendan.
Yeah. And we played. There was this animated video game. I think is it King's Quest or
Dragon's Lair.
Dragon's Lair. Yes.
Yep.
King's Quest
we had
was
Dragon's
like a computer
Lair.
game, but yeah, Dragon's Lair. And I think we spent like all night. I don't think we slept at all. I think we spent all night trying to beat it.
to be young and touring. You'd like spend the whole night and it would be fine. Like I feel like tour now. I'm just like, where's the bed?
Yeah, exactly. And I remember there were bench seats from cars set up for people to sleep on, and a giant neon orange bear.
Yeah, which I still have, which is in our backyard now.
But there was a screen printing shop in there, and you could play music in there. It was kind of like it was a utopian kind of place. Yeah,
there was a bike repair area in the front. There was like a pretty big screen printing area where you had like 3 different stations you could work at. There was, lots of everybody's weird rooms. There was kind of a library with like a cafe because one of the roommates had this crazy espresso machine in the back. So I don't know, maybe when you were there, he might not have been there yet, but at some point he moved in. And so during our shows, if you like found your way to the back room, which was down a few tunnels, like there's this guy with this like beautiful machine in a library, like serving coffee. I mean, it was fucking awesome. I mean, it was just so, it was really felt like, you talk about ambition. I mean, that was it. I was just like, I was set. I could have done that. I mean, at the time I felt like I was just like, this is it. Like we figured it out. Like we don't, most of the art making that we made, or for me, there were certain people that really synced up with it. Like I really synced up with that place. Like I was decorating the walls all the time. For every show, we would kind of and we didn't do shows every day. We did shows like once or twice a month. We would rearrange the place. Like it kind of had this kind of grand main room where you weren't allowed to kind of do permanent structure. So things would move around for different shows. Like we'd move the stage, which was just like some 2x4s and plywood, not very extravagant. Nothing was extravagant. It was just this awesome place. And then we had a practice room in the back too, past where the stage generally was, where Lightning Bolt practiced and, some other people practiced. Mostly Lightning Bolt practiced. And it was awesome. And it was from 1995 to 2001. And it became, I don't know, it was cool because it was a venue that was big enough where we could have big shows. Like Le Tigre played in there, Man is the Bastard played in there, which are like, Man is the Bastard played like their only East Coast show ever at our house, which was amazing. The Le Tigre show probably shouldn't have happened there. It was just like huge and we didn't know we were just like these dumb college, mostly dudes just being like, what the fuck is going on? Like our house is full of women. Like this has never happened before. And there were 600 people there. And we're just like, they were like more money came in the door than we'd ever dealt with before. We were such novices about so many things. Like now that I've toured so much, I kind of feel bad for bands that came through there because we just like hospitality. I mean, we would cook food for everybody, which was cool. But then we would definitely be like, yeah, there's like a minivan seat you could sleep on.
Right. Well, that was just kind of the standard back then, at least for
I guess
bands
so.
Maybe not that bands that could draw that many people, but
Le Tigre didn't stay over. Yeah, and Fugazi, I mean, for me in the house, Fugazi was huge, and I think Matt Brinkman was my kind of best friend and roommate, and like we started it together, and he was a huge driving force behind that, and a lot of kind of wonderful things that came out of Providence, just as a like creative force. He's my roommate actually from freshman year at Rhode Island School of Design. and I played music with him in this kind of band called Mind Flayer. And but he was he was really into booking shows, so kind of booking shows thing. And I did some, but it really was just driven by him. Like, he's just a ferocious music lover. But yeah, that place was awesome.
I mean, you talk about how your parents weren't hippies, but a place like Fort Thunder feels about as hippie-ish as you can get in some ways.
Yeah, but it was so aggro that, I mean, you know, it was punk. It was punk, but it was, but you know, but we were all nice or something. Like, I don't know, like it wasn't.
I mean, it was like a utopian commune in a sense.
Yeah, except we had, like, you know, we were growing like maybe one strawberry on the roof.
Dystopian commune.
It was dystopian. Yeah. It was amazing, and then it all fell apart because, like, that whole area it didn't even get gentrified. It got fucking downgraded into like a grocery store and like a Radio Shack and a Staples or whatever. But, and then it fell apart, and you know, it's that was like a heyday. And there's been other heydays in Providence too, of which somehow I've always lived in the center of. But that was like the hayest of the heydays for me, for feeling like, I mean, Providence was crazy. Like, we had that mill, we had that space, and then there was like a neighboring, the building that attached to it had this upstairs space with a bunch of people. And then there were mills all around it of equal size, and they were full of like artists, and like, you know, there were like 2 galleries popped up. Like, around the year 2000, there were probably like 150 different artists and musicians all in this zone, you know, in this literally like this, like a intersection, and all these mills around that, like a mill complex. And people were having shows. It was just like, and you know, we had like you know, the year 2000 party or whatever. Like, it was just like, shit was just crazy, and no one ever really got hurt. Like, it was just this amazing. It just worked so perfectly, in a way, you know, and it was so lawless, but everybody was like so nice that it worked. And so, I don't know. And then it all, you know, and then just like anything, like development just destroyed it. And, you know, and then so we realized we didn't own it. Like, you know, at that point we sort of thought we owned it, because we could literally, our landlord was so kind of absentee and slumlordish. Like, you could kick holes in the wall or whatever, and he wouldn't, as long as you paid the rent.
Right. I remember the place that I was talking about before, where Erebon Radar and Black Dice played. We would play a game when we first moved in where we would throw hammers at each other, and they would go through the wall.
Oh my God. Oh Jesus. That's I've never played that game. I should suggest that to my son. He would love it.
How does the experience of living at Fort Thunder inform the way that you've set up your life now? Ultimately, what happened is, you know, the development of the city is what caused that place to come to an end. But do you think you would still be living there right now with your family if that hadn't been a factor?
No.
Yeah, I mean, so it was like, it probably would have happened at some point or another. But so,
yeah,
how is your life different now? Like, how have you set up? The reason I ask is it looks, I saw some pictures of you and your kid playing on Instagram, and it reminded me of Fort Thunder in a way. It looked like an art project.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm actually finally starting to like sink into this new space, and a little bit has been because he's been coming over here now. Like, my son has been coming over here just because, especially now with the, you know, we don't have any daycare or whatever, and we're not allowed to go anywhere. So luckily, amazingly, I have this space, and we can come here, and we have like toys, and, you know, we play games, and he's painting a little bit and stuff. And I mean, barely. He's not really painting. Kind of hates art, which is hilarious. But But yeah,
I know
it is.
I tell this story sometimes, but I played in that band Parts and Labor, and I know you know some of the guys from that band.
Yeah. Heck
But
yeah, of course.
we were on tour with Pierced Arrows, which was the second band from the Dead Moon couple.
Okay, I remember Pierce Arrows.
Anyway, so those guys were really punk and DIY. Like they had their own lathe even to make records.
Yeah,
That's how
right.
DIY they were.
That's always the thing. It's just like they got their own lathe. You know?
But
That's
but their kid was
serious.
like an IRS agent. He came to one of the shows. So you have to be prepared for that.
I'm prepared. I mean, you know, we make jokes about it, like, yeah, and I'm sure every artist and musician does. It's just like, you know, if my kid becomes like a lawyer and makes money, like, good for him. You know, like he can sustain this family.
Exactly.
But I don't know what he's going to. He's just looking just like he's just going to like ride a bike off a cliff at an early age. I don't know. He's a real spaz. Just trying to keep him alive. I'm not too worried about his profession. But so yeah, so it's been a crazy. So we had a really cool space from 2000. I had my own space from 2002 to 2004 in Providence within a bigger 2-building mill complex that also kind of had this amazing heyday where there were like 7 venues and I was doing shows too. So after Fort Thunder, I had this, like, the next place was like kind of all small venues, like bustling or like clustered together in these 2 big buildings. And that lasted 2 years before we all got kicked out. And then me and some of my old roommates, like Matt Brinkman being one of them, had this space for a really long time from 2004. I mean, some people moved in 2002. I moved in like 2004 up until like 2016. Like when my son was born, I still had the last remnants of this space. And it was a really big space, and it wasn't like as easy. It was kind of like a 3rd floor space with like shorter ceilings and not great access. We had some shows in there, but it wasn't a priority. And it wasn't as big. It didn't have like a grand hall, but it had the kind of vibe. I mean, you know, we started little by little, you start to kind of sink in and you forget the scars of the old place and you start like installing things in your rental property that you really think will stay there forever or something. I still kind of keep falling for that same illusion, and I'm starting to do it again this time. So, yeah, I'm interested in these. I just love kind of creating this space that feels like a home, even though I no longer live in my studio. I mean, for years, almost up till 2016, I at least part-time, like, always lived in these mill buildings and lived, 20 feet away from my drum set. And that was just like a priority. But then, since having a kid, then it just became, the priority just became like a safe, chemical free place, for good reason. And now we rent, my wife and I and little Rohan, our son, rent a house, and we rent the first floor in a house, and we have these awesome, our landlords are friends of ours who live on the second floor, and they have a kid the same age, and then they have a kid who's a little older, which is amazing during this kind of time. I don't know exactly how it is in LA with the COVID-19 stuff, but it's pretty locked down. So we're isolating kind of as a big house. And then we have this huge yard. Like the property is, I think, 4 lots. So the backyard is just this expanse. And so the kids all still are playing in the backyard through this whole period, which is a lifesaver because he just loves his friends or whatever. And he's really great friends with both of the kids upstairs. But it's a house, and I for years, like, the idea of living in a house was just like petrifying to me. But now,
what did it represent that scared you?
I think it just represented the idea that I couldn't, like, throw hammers at my roommates or whatever, kind of like your style. It just, and it not even represented, like, literally is a place where you just can't turn the music up. And I think, and you can't, there's something about I've pretty much found it again, like in this space. Like I walk into my studio, and I just feel so free. And it's kind of how I've always felt in these spaces. Like, it's like my stuff. And I mean, now I have like tons of plants in here. And, like when I walked in here today, and I can't get over here anywhere near as much as I want to lately. And, I came in and the light was beautiful because it has this kind of like these high windows. And again, I'm lucky to have this kind of New England architecture, and I'm lucky within that context to be actually to like find these spaces. Not everybody. I mean, there's plenty of people in Providence and, and of course, like in New York and all sorts of places that, there's amazing buildings around, but you're never going to actually get a good space or more than a closet size space or something.
Unless you're wealthy.
Unless you're wealthy, of course. I'm kind of like, even this space, like I've known the family that's owned this mill for a whole bunch of years, and their kids like come to lightning bolt shows, like the landlord's sons who are all grown, like come to our shows and stuff. And so I just landed, it feels like I've landed in this kind of perfect place. I mean, I still got to pay the rent and not be a jerk. And I'm not a jerk. I'm like a really, I try to be a good tenant.
What do you think about the most throughout the day?
Again, the context of this moment is just so crazy. And it's partially crazy because my wife, Jung Il Hong is my wife. She's
who's also
like an artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's an artist, and mostly doing textile stuff these days. But she started, like a lot of people have started, she started doing this, sort of got a bunch of people in town and outside of town to do these, to do masks, like handmade, just hand sewn masks for, basically because we have a friend who's an ER doctor, and we were talking to him, and he's just like, well, fuck, we don't have any masks. So we got a bunch of people, and mostly she got a bunch of people to make masks, which, and the cloth masks do like a limited amount of protection for this stuff. I mean, this is such a crazy conversation because, like, I've listened to some of your podcasts, and they're generally not done during pandemics. So it's like there's this kind of context about this moment, and then my place in this thing is, so this thing that she started doing, and then we promoted it on Instagram and Facebook, and it's kind of ballooned into this crazy level. Like now we have a GoFundMe, and we've raised, like, I think we're up to. But we did a little fundraiser, and now we're doing a GoFundMe, and we're closing in like $30,000 of funds that we've raised, and we've teamed up with. There's a group in town who also went to the Rhode Island School of Design, and now they make inflatable art, and they're called New House, and they've switched over to making face shields for doctors, and so they're cranking out face shields. Jung is still kind of like orchestrating. Local sewers making these masks, and they get dropped off at the house, and she washes them. And now we just got some surgical masks in from China, and now she's talking to like a manufacturer that's local that has switched over to sewing surgical masks and gowns. But the long story long, she's like running. She's like on the phone 24 hours a day. It seems like. I feel like I wake up in the middle of the night, she's over there like texting, trying, or like emailing, and so now we have a website, and we're just getting these emails, and there's, like, I'm a doctor in this town, and I have one face shield, and it's like, it's tied together with some rope, or like I'm a nurse in this hospital, and I wear one mask all day long, and I go from patient to patient to patient with the same mask, which is not what you're supposed to be doing. And so, I don't know. So we're like caught up in this thing. And so I'm basically just doing childcare. And like, I walk into the studio by myself, and I feel so free. And it's really like the freest place I feel. And I'm just not like getting that. And I'm kind of like losing my mind a little bit. But, I was talking to a friend of mine about it. I'm just like, oh God, I had like me and Jung had an argument, and it's just like, I feel like I'm like angry at Gandhi because like he's doing a sit-in and he got some like dirt on the rug or something. Like she's doing this amazing thing, and I'm like so focused on like I'm not getting my studio time or whatever. So I'm kind of in this like jerk moment, is what I'm saying.
Jerk mode.
I'm in jerk mode, but I'm just exhausted, man. 3-year-olds, god damn it, I can't go on. But at the same time, I feel great right now.
Are you? So there was you were hesitant to have a kid for many years, or you were putting it off.
Yeah, we pushed it till the bitter end. I was it was like a week before her 40th.
So what advice would you give to someone like me who's 39 and is on the fence? Or what, not necessarily advice, but what can you tell me?
I have nothing to say. We had friends that, there was a few friends that were like, you got to have kids. It's like the most amazing thing ever. And then a few other friends, like mostly artist people who were like, do not have a kid. Like you guys, like you're committed. You're workaholic artists, musician people, like don't have a kid. Don't screw it up. Like you're giving back to the world plenty. And I had specific friends. There's like used to be this group called Nautical Almanac, Twig and Carly, who were a married couple, and now they're split up and they're off doing their own things. And they had a lathe in their house, so they're committed, like noise freakazoids. So, but Carly was always just like, and Carly's kind of this like wise sage. They both sort of have this wise sage thing in different ways. But Carly was just like, you are in a band and you communicate with a lot of people, and like it is just selfish to have like one kid. Like you need to spread out. Not that I'm like parenting as like a person in a band. I'm not like parenting all these people, but you're like communicating with people, and people look up to you to some extent, and you kind of, I think for Lightning Bolt, like we've always tried to be pretty available, or I've tried to be pretty available to people. It's like, and I don't know if that's like watching Fugazi play or something, but it's just me. It's just like I play, we used to play we generally historically have played on the floor, and then, the show ends and you're just on the floor and everybody's there and you're just like talking to everybody or whatever. There's nowhere to go. So anyway, but she was just like, don't have a kid. Like having a kid is selfish. Like, why would you give all that love for everyone to just one person? And I was kind of like, yeah, you're right. I don't want to have a kid.
Well, that's kind of a scarcity thought, right? It's the idea that you only have so much love to give versus having kids, as some people will say, increases your capacity for love and doesn't preclude you from also giving love to the other people in your life.
Yeah, but it sucks your time. I mean, I've got love. Yeah,
there's only so much time.
Time I do not have. Love I have. Time I do not have. And energy, I mean, I would never, trade in. I mean, once this life is in your, I mean, he's like an amazing little guy. It's insane. Like, I mean, even it's been 3.5 years, and I'm just like, I look at him and I'm just like, I can't believe that I'm like a dad and we have this kid, and like, he's just always laughing, or except when he's screaming. But yeah, it's unprecedented. It is true. It opens you up for this love that you like. I'm like going to break down into tears even talking about it. But like, you just can't.
Please do. That's podcast gold.
Podcast gold. Well, it's even better if it's video, but you can try. Maybe you can try to hear. You can kind of hear a little bit of a fraying at the edge of my voice, but I'm coming out of it. But the emotional roller coaster. I've never felt the level of love. You just can't, and it just switches. Like, you're like riding your bike down a hill at like 100 miles an hour, and you're like, fuck it, like I could die today. I don't even care. Like I'm just like high on life. And then you have a kid, and you're like, I got to get home. Like I can't get. It's just like not about me anymore. And it is. I'm still selfish as fuck, and I like try to make it. I have to carve out my time, and I have to carve out my purpose. But at the end of the day, like,
And also, a kid is to a certain extent an extension of yourself. Not completely, but it's your genetic legacy to the world.
it is. And man, trying to fucking turn that into something positive, it just seems like so daunting. I'm just like, I don't know what this is. I have no idea. He's so out of control, and I'm not a rule maker, and it's just like, I'm just like fun dad, you know, which comes back to haunt me because 3 hours of fun dad becomes like fucking exhausted dad. But it's crazy. It's just something you can't. When you become a parent, it's like you wake up that next morning and you look outside and you're like, the world is sort of the same, but it's not. It's like you shift into this. It's like a dimension, like just a little to the left, and you can't cross back into that other dimension again. Like it just changes. But man, it is so, like the moments are so tender. It's just crazy. I'm you know, and he's still so young, so he hasn't like punched me in the face yet, or he hasn't punched me in the face so hard that it hurts or something. Like, I think the teenage years, you know, there's a reason why families send their children off at some point, because,
well, he might punch you in the heart so much that it hurts at some
yeah,
point.
I can't even imagine, because the other thing it makes you do is you reflect on your relationship with your own parents, and you're like, I have a good relationship with my parents, but you know, we talk like once a month maybe, or we talk a little more now because of mostly trying to FaceTime, which my little guy doesn't care that much about, but we try. But you're like, oh my God, like, I am the center of this child's universe, and we are just so close. Like, we just like hugging hours a day. And so, you know, whether he's on my back, like, or on my head, or we're just like, you're still bonded in this physical way that's just so crazy. And then you look at your relationship with your parents and you're like, wow, how did we just become like these two people that talk on the phone every once in a while? It's terrifying in a way, because you're like, you mean to tell me like I'm not going to be like this with my son forever? Like, that's heartbreaking. But obviously,
maybe if this pandemic never ends, then you will.
Oh my God,
he'll always need you.
He'll always need me. Oh my God. Yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, I have like a little dad text group where it's just like, any good day you don't kill yourself or your kid is a good day. But you know, and that's the dark side. You're like, it's just mind-numbingly, you know, it's just crazy. But it's the most powerful thing. So if you want to experience the most powerful thing, you know, if you want to jump into like the fire, it's like, have a kid.
Well, I was thinking, I want that, and I also want to have all the time that I have to myself now. So I'll just get servants to raise the kid, like nannies. Well, yeah,
and definitely.
Stuff, you know.
Well, yeah, and then fucking COVID-19 comes along, and the servants can't come over anymore.
No, they'll live at the house.
That's
It'll be like the Royals, where they have, you know, they spend like 5 minutes with the kid every day.
Hell yeah, yeah. I mean, he's in daycare 5 days a week, so like we've definitely get sitting for him. So we were not ready for full on isolation with a 3-year-old. Not prepared. But yeah, you got to get help. Fuck yeah. You got to get help.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for spending your precious time with me.
No, I feel great. That was fun. That was great.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.